She looked back towards the main road. We need to get home now. I nodded, agreed, but we can't blindly run out into the main road. Not with... I gestured towards the hellish sounds coming from the direction we needed to go. Whatever the hell is happening right now. A look of realization crossed her face. The alleyways, she explained, causing me to remember the maze of the alleys and the crisis cross between the main street buildings. All right, but first, let's see what exactly the hell is going on. She hesitated, but nodded, motioning to be quiet. I led the way to the corner of the building on one side of the interaction. Just let me look around the corner quickly, I whispered again. She nodded silently, taking a deep breath. I peered around the corner into the main street. If I hadn't already been in shock, I don't know I would have been able to keep from screaming at the grisly sight that awaited me. It was like a scene out of a horror movie. We were dashing from building to building, chucking all sorts of things, chucking kitchen knives. There were even one man wielding what looked like an old sword which had hung inside the occulter shop. That wasn't the horrifying sight. There were dozens of bodies littering Main Street. It seemed people had dashed out of anywhere, the diner, grocery, and hardware store, and more. Blood pooled around there, still others, some holding their own arms or stomachs to stop bleeding, were attempting to run away from those wielding weapons. They didn't make it very far, though, as they were overwhelmed by others. They all screamed and shouted to what sounded like a total and complete rage as they chased them down. "Fuck me," was all I could whisper out. I pulled my head back and looked on my face. Must have told Aubrey all she needed to know. Her face had gone pale like a sheet. "That bad?" she asked. I nodded. I could see the coat turning in her head. "Okay, we stick to the plan. We use the alleys, get through downtown, and get back to our houses." I felt a wave of gratitude pass over me. She was managing to hold her composure better than I could have hoped for. I nodded and followed her back. We slipped into the gloomy shade of alley that ran behind the building. On the right side of the street, we made our way carefully through them, making sure not to attract any attention from the hell still erupting on the main drag. But we saw little glimpses of everything. We reached a T-junction. We both saw people we'd known for all our lives inflicting violence upon each other. So shocking and vile, I couldn't bring myself to write it down. I would lose what little sanity remains in my head if I did. We made it to the back part of the lot of the diner. We intentionally met up in and stopped to wait. The sounds of gunshots blasting out caused us to both freeze, duck behind in the alley again. And not a moment too soon either, because we saw Sheriff Floyd explore fly down the road. Sheriff Wake was leaning out the window, using one hand to steer while firing his pistol with the other. I only saw his face for a second, but it was enough to see the crazy look there the others had. The sound of the roaring engine faded, along with the gunshots, after a few seconds, but we could still hear the screech, tires echoing over all the other chaos. Aubrey turned to look at me, and almost hopeless look on her face. Eddie, what the hell do we do? She asked weakly. I killed and thought hard and fast. We can't stay outside for much longer. We stay out here, we're dead. We need to find some shelter. At least for a little while, I spoke. We need to find a place to lie low for a little while we know we can make it safely back to the other side of town. Her face turned into a mask of panic. But what about our parents? I felt a knot tie itself in my stomach. The thought of Mom and Dad caught up in this hell without a way to get a hold of me, threatening to overwhelm me. But I kept as level-headed as I could. We're not going to be able to help them if we both end up like the others, I said as calmly as possible. There's too many people here over the place to avoid all the way back. We need to find a place, somewhere, that not many people would have been at, and hunker down until we think it's safe enough to keep going. She looked like she wanted to argue, but nodded after a few moments. Then she looked at me. The library, she said simply. Not many people besides the adults go there anymore. It's right on the backside of this building. She pointed at the brick apartments that made up the side of the alley. I nodded. Okay, let's wait a second, then go. She nodded, and after not seeing anyone for a minute, we began moving from car to car, parking lot to parking lot, using them as cover to reach the street. I looked towards the diner, the inside of the windows. I could see the splattered in blood, evidence of the slaughter that must have taken place inside. I also noticed, with a vague air that surprised me, that the ground of the diner parking lot seemed to be littered with smartphones. The screen from many were still lit up, and as I glanced down to see a notice flashing up at me. Test alert. This is a test of the National Wireless Emergency Alert System. No action is needed. As I read it, a sound snapped in my head. It was the sound of a static from the radio coming from a few cars up, sharing a look of panic with Aubrey, and the coincidence of the sound would draw unaware attention our way. We hurried down the line towards the sound. It was coming from a red YJ waiver, one which I recognized belonged to Mr. and Mrs. Noddle, two survivalists who lived farther up in the mountains, but came down into town to buy supplies and sometimes eat at the diner. Scrambling to the passage door, I yanked on the handle, prying for it to unlock. The door manfully opened, and with a last look around, I practically flew into the passenger seat. The crackling sound was coming from the old CB radio mounted under the dash, and I reached out to shut it off. That was when the static changed to a smooth sound of a man's voice